Well, hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Wheelhouse Cycling Podcast. Catherine Bates and I'm joined by the one and only Henk Vogels, just in time for Christmas, Henk.
Oh, it's so good to be here at this time of the year as well. I love it.
I've got my Mrs. Claus, do we call it Mrs. Claus, apron on. We've got a Santa hat for you there. You can chuck that on. It's summer. We're gearing up for a hot Christmas, Henk. Have you been out on the bike?
I get out on the bike very early with the boys at about 5:15 in the morning, and the only reason I do it is so I'm at the brew shop by 7 o'clock, and at the latest, otherwise I just don't do it. I just wouldn't get up and ride.
And so you can eat all the Christmas ham.
Yes.
All the Christmas ham.
Yeah, all the pies during the year and all the Christmas ham and all the great foods, trifle and all those lovely Dutch treats we used to have when Mum was, making them when I was living back at home as a little tacker.
Joel is missing. Joel, we miss you, man. He's been a little bit under the weather, Henk, but you're keeping his seat warm,
yes,
so thank you.
Just keeping it warm, Joel. That's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing, just making sure that point gets across.
Well, Joel and I have had some good laughs this year at some of the shenanigans that have been going on, but we've loved the off-season. Like, never has an off-season had so much to talk about. You'd think it would be the downtime, but we're going to go through some of the off-season news that has dropped this week. We're talking about Pogacar to the Giro. Bradley Wiggins, he's got a bit of imposter syndrome, or so he told the BBC. We're going to talk about a new cycling league, Henk, a super league. Before we hit record, you had some fruity words to describe that. We'll get into that. And we're going to talk NRS and ARA and everything that you are up to, plotting world domination with your domestic team.
Oh, let's get into it.
We're going to start with today Pogacar. Now, he has announced this week that he will be riding the Giro. He will then be riding the Tour de France. He's going to the Olympics and also the World Championships. Massive program. Doing the double, the Giro Tour de France double. What do you think? I mean, what's your initial feedback? Because I can tell you the fans are going bananas, Henk. Like, they are so excited to see him at both. Is it inspired genius or is it madness?
Well, I reckon it's a little bit of madness. On a personal note, I was asked to do the Giro in 2006 after leading Robbie out, I don't know, for all his Giro wins and then going to the Tour. And I was absolutely cooked after doing the Giro. Mind you, I did the classics, which Pogacar will do as well. So he'll do the classics, he'll do the Giro, then the Tour, and then the Olympics, and then the Worlds. Like, there's not many people on earth that have made that happen. And I'll tell you what, there's going to be somebody pretty happy that he's doing the Giro, and that's little his nemesis in Vingegaard. Because I think when you go to the Giro, it's a massive risk. It really is a massive risk because you go so deep. It's a touch and go whether you're as good at the Tour. And that's why Lance never did it, and he won 7 Tours.
Well, the last time it was done, winning both was Pantani, and that was in 1998. And I actually picked up his book by Matt Rendell in the thrift store this morning around the corner. So somebody's read it and said, pass that on. Pantani, of course, has a very interesting story from a very different era. Do you think it's possible for a modern day athlete, because times have changed, to do the double?
It depends on how deep he has to go in May. I mean, if he goes super deep in May and goes right, has a massive fight on his hands to go, beyond, as hard as he has to win the Tour, when he won the Tour, even as that hard, then recover and then come back and be good in the last second to third week in the Tour de France, I reckon he's going to struggle against Jumbo.
But then why is he doing it? Like, where's this come from?
Well, he may be thinking, listen, I'll do the Giro. It's going to make me incredibly strong. I'll recover and I'll be even better than I was. Which, I mean, I did read an article on him saying that there's other people that have actually said, no, you're crazy, don't do that. We need to be good in July, not May. So maybe he's going to take the Giro and see how he goes and he thinks, okay, all the world's best riders are in July, so, I'll towel everyone else up in May, win the Giro, then they'll all be frightened of me in July. So, I'm just trying to go through this guy's psyche here right now, and I don't know, because he's won 2 Tour de France's from the age of, by the time he's 22. So, he obviously thinks he can beat him. So, you wouldn't do that unless you think you can win both. And he's obviously just come out and said to his, I don't care, I'm doing it. I think I can actually do this. Where everyone else is going, hang on. He's been held. The reins have been let off, I think. So that's what I think's happened.
Yeah. Well, I know the fans are excited. Merksy, you were pretty excited, almost like a child on Christmas morning when you found out.
I am pumped. I cannot wait. March the 2nd, his first race, World Tour race at Strada Bianchi.
Ooh, well, he'll start the season in the Classics. Now, Henk, aside from the fact that physically it's pretty exhausting to try and do the double, how do you mitigate the risks around the falls and that sort of stuff? Because we're seeing now so much nervousness at the beginning of these Grand Tours. Same thing every year, right? This is the most crashes we've ever seen. And the older riders always say the younger riders have no respect, and we hear the same. It's like a broken record. We hear it every year, but it's real. And some of these guys have multiple falls within a single race. So how, as a team, do they protect him from that sort of thing to make sure he just gets through it?
Well, firstly, I reckon he's a really good bike handler. Let's talk about some people that maybe weren't so good, Froomey and Richie seem to always be lying on the floor somewhere along the way. And with the utmost respect to both of those guys.
Geraint Thomas, I call him Autumn Leaves.
Yeah.
Because he seems to fall so much.
Yeah. So there's guys who seem to be on the ground all the time, and there's guys who are just like cats who can just find their way out of a problem. I reckon he's one of them. Lance crashed once, I reckon, in 7 or 8 attempts in the Tour de France. But also, if you've got a really good team, they're surrounding you. You're not taking risks. And, that's what it actually means to be professional too. Like, a professional cyclist knows when to take risks. You don't win the Tour de France. It's the old saying, you don't win the Tour de France on the descent. You can lose it, though, on the descent. So people don't take stupid risks, and you surround yourself with your teammates. And if it's wet, don't be stupid, the thing is, he's so young, so he's got a good head on his shoulders. So, but obviously a very good bike handler. So for that, yeah, that's one thing. I think you either do or you don't. You either fall or you don't fall. You're a crasher or a non-crasher. I don't know how we can make a new category out of that one. I think.
Can Merksy?
Hey.
Hank, you've ridden Roubaix, right? You've ridden Roubaix, and Pogacar seems like he wants to win everything. What's he got to do to change his body to ride and win Roubaix?
He just needs to get in the gym a bit and then start training a bit earlier. Once he wins 3 or 4 tours, he's going to start going after that stuff. So stay tuned, Merksy.
Yeah.
He's on ski.
Yeah.
Hey.
Now, I want to talk about the implication this might have on the Aussie Jay Vine. He had a bit of a rough season. He started with a brilliant win at Tour Down Under, but then he really got lost in the wilderness. We had big hopes for him, though. I think Aussie fans after Tour Down Under thought that he would really be the next in line, nipping at the heels of Pogacar. He did come back at Tour of Turkey and have a really brilliant win, which I think was very symbolic for him, because he might have been one of the only ones, he and his close team, who held that faith in him when people were talking about, had his talent been overplayed. Do you think that having Pogacar go to 2 Grand Tours, that will help Jay Vine, because it will give him quite a clear job if he is on one of the teams for that, rather than putting all the pressure on him and skewing his season in that way?
I think Jay needs to start looking at another very good domestic rider by the name of Sepp Kuss and start modelling his career on that. And when you start going, okay, listen, I'm going to be the absolute super domestic. I'm going to be Pogacar's number 1, the last guy with him in the Giro and the Tour, or pick one or the other. Then you are then elevating yourself from someone who can win a mountaintop finish in a race, or to be the next best guy next to Pogacar, because you are then, your value just going up and up and up. because you've seen what has happened to Sepp Kuss now. He's now next level. You know, he was always incredible, but an incredible climber. But now we're looking at him at God status, at legend status, that he, you know, wins the Vuelta. And he may have had some help, but, you know, that's where he needs to start thinking. I mean, Jay is incredible. Unfortunately, I put him in the same bracket as Richie and Froome, where he needs to be a little bit more cautious, make some better decisions. But his climbing and his time trialling are world-class, elite level, some of the best in the world. So he can definitely elevate himself in the Grand Tour scheme of things. He just needs to put himself as his right-hand man, as the Pog's right-hand man. And we're looking at another Sepp Kuss and possibly another Cadet Evans.
How good is that? I hadn't really thought about him in the way of Sepp Kuss, but I think that's brilliant. Now, speaking of brilliant riders, I want to change topics a little bit here. We're here on the Wheelhouse Cycling Podcast with Kate Bates and Henk Vogels sitting in the chair today. Let's talk about Bradley Wiggins. He's one of the greatest cyclists of the last generation. And he won a Tour de France, of course, Olympic gold. But he's come out on a podcast this week, Henk. The podcast is called Imposter Syndrome, so I think that probably says a lot about it. But he said that his biggest motivation was being told by his father that he would never make it and never be any good. I got to tell you, that hit me hard when I listened to that, because I thought you often hear the stories about the good motivations and how somebody was so helpful and supportive and what a wonderful dream team. But Bradley Wiggins had quite a different journey. And you know this story quite well, don't you, Henk? Because his father was an Aussie, actually, lived in Australia.
Yeah, I have obviously been my cycling heritage is my father used to race in the 60s, raced against Eddie Merckx, actually, and he was part of the Australian cycling scene through the 70s, 80s and 90s. So my dad knew, and a lot of my dad's friends knew of Brad Wiggins' his dad. And I heard that he was a very, very good bike rider, but also a bad bastard. He was really not a nice man at all. And, you know, take that as you want, but, you know, his life ended in very poor circumstances. And the story goes that Brad went to actually go to his dad's funeral and turned around and came home. So I find that really difficult to hear, actually, that your motivation is coming from that point. But I've been told in my career that I would never ever make it, and that spurred me on. So maybe, you know, that it is a big motivation for him. And what a rider he was, and what he ended up doing after getting that talking to by the old man was pretty unbelievable. To be one of the first ever track Olympians to then go out and win a Tour de France and change your whole body shape, and however he did it was incredible, because we lived through all that. To see him go from an incredibly powerful track pursuiter to a world-class climber and winning Tour de France was beyond belief, and we didn't think we could do it. And no one could think that would be humanly possible, but he did it. So it was a bit of a trailblazer.
Well, and he had in his coaching circle Shane Sutton, of course, and Shane almost became the father that he didn't have. And of course, Shane comes from Moree in New South Wales. He's an Aussie, brother of Gary Sutton. We know Sutton very well. He was my coach. And so it feels to me like that the motivation coming from being criticised by his father, he was able to channel into a pretty positive way. We do talk about athletes, what motivates them, and I don't know about you, but I always get asked by people, what motivated you? And it's actually a hard question to answer. You don't wake up every morning with a checklist of things that are getting you out of bed. It's more like a deeper fire and a passion.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I like I said before, I had certain people say that I'd never make it.
Oh, come on, tell us one, because I was talking last week about a coach who told me that I should go back to university.
Yeah, Charlie Walsh. Charlie Walsh said you'll never make it. You don't have the physiology at all to make it. So you're just. He actually called me pack filler.
Pack pack filler.
Yeah. You're just here so you can finish the races in Europe so we can get starts for next year. So he only actually took me to do the road, which was awesome because I didn't give a rat's ass about like the track stuff I was doing, and I was in the Olympic track team going to the Barcelona Olympics. I just wanted to be a road pro. So I'm riding the Sedimana Bergamasca with Lance Armstrong going, beauty, getting up the road in breakaways and riding, with Vladimir Belli and Fabio Casatelli. And I'm just pack filler, which was awesome for me because I'm racing the best races in Italy as pack filler and then end up having a road career, which was 15 years long. So it was I was pretty happy to be pack filler.
There's a pretty iconic photo of you at Para-Roubaix running top 10, and it was, back in the pre-helmet days, so you look totally badass with all the mud all over your face. Is that in one of those moments where you were thinking, hey, Charlie, check this out?
Oh, no, I never gave Charlie another thought after that because I motivated myself. Like, I remember that being told that, and I was like, I'll effing show you, mate. But for me, I just wanted to win. My career was about, me being the best. It wasn't about trying to show him who was the best. And, I had a great role model in my dad, who was also an Olympian. So for me, it was huge.
Because you're Henk Jr.
Yes, I'm Henk the Third, or Henk de Derde, which is in Dutch the third. I'm actually Hendrikus Bernard Vogels the Third, de Derde. So my dad was Hendrikus, and my opa, which is my grandfather, he was also Hendrikus, so I'm like the third. And anyway, I cut that off at the knees when I moved to Australia. And when you go to a roll call and you're like, oh, Jenny Smith, yeah, hands up. Hendrikus Bernard Vogels, and everyone giggled, and I was like, yeah, put my hand up. It's like, so I cut that off on the knees with my three boys. So, but yeah, so that for me, the motivation certainly was my own, but I had some great role models, and it's also good. I think it's good to be told you can't make it, and you find the fire within yourself to do it. Kate, I'm sure you had your role models as well with your family, which is obviously huge in cycling too. But for me, it was always about myself and what I could do.
Yeah,
more so than anyone else.
I had a bit of a dream team with my mum and dad, but as much as that and Sutto, I wanted to make them proud. It wasn't that the motivation came from them. It was that given that they'd given me so much support, I did feel a little bit indebted to repay that. We're going to change topics here because I feel like we could talk about our dads all day. There's another podcast for that. We could make a separate podcast for that. But I want to talk to you about these murmurs, these whispers out of Saudi Arabia about a Super League. They've been talking about it. We often talk here on the Wheelhouse about WTF UCI. It's become a bit of a segment, actually.
Agreed.
Yeah, there's always something. I think in the last couple of weeks they've cracked down on sock height.
Now it's the levers.
Oh, now the levers can't point in, bend in because...
My whole team is going to be dark because all their levers are all bent in.
Oh, see, sometimes I can see reason in it. Other times it seems madness. But fair to say, as a whole, anybody who has encountered the UCI thinks that they're a bit of an antiquated business and they could do better. And so they keep popping up with these new ideas, a new cycling league, something like this. But what do you think? Is there anything wrong with how it's working at the moment? And would something like a super league with a ton of money actually work? Would it be a positive game changer for the sport?
The ideology, yes, 100%. We need to make it like the NBA. We need to, get rid of just individual sponsors coming in, and we need, all the money coming into the one place and then feeding the teams their 35 million euros each for the year, 15 teams or whatever it is. And every single sponsor just sponsors the UCI or the new league. But it's been tried before with Tinkoff tried to get onto it. Jonathan Vaughters is very interested and always active in trying to make things better in cycling. And I think he's great, and he would be someone who I think could lead it. But don't tell me if it's coming out of Saudi that we're going to have 6 rounds in Saudi Arabia or in the dirt, because it just doesn't work. Like, you need fans, and the spectators are just not there. So yes, the money is coming from there, but you can't just have a full, 6 rounds in the Middle East somewhere. I mean, yes, Turkey's a great race, and Tour of Qatar is a great windy race once a year, but you need the 50 deep fans on the Quaremont and Tour of Flanders and Roubaix and Giro de Lombardia and Milan-San Remo and Tour de France, Giro, Vuelta. You need the Romandy, Swiss. You need, races in Quebec City and the US and Philly, and you need that whole global sport. You can't just make it like, in the Middle East somewhere with, $17 trillion of, they've got so much money, but, the interest in sport. I mean, they tried to do this with Live Golf recently, right?
They did, and it ended up merging back together.
It merged back together, that's right.
I would say if one of the athletes who, on value, said, I'm not going to sign with Live Golf, and then they came back together, they would be empty-pocketed.
Yes, well, they got huge coin, right, out of that. Some of those golfers got huge coin. I think it has to happen. I mean, every year you just hear a struggle of these teams, and especially, I mean, look at the biggest budgets. When Sky had the biggest budget, they were pantsing everyone. Now, I'm not sure whether they still have the biggest budget and Jumbo are now trump them, and now they're pantsing everyone. But there's got to be some, is Archaea going as good as Jumbo Visma because the budget discrepancy?
Well, do you think a budget, I've floated this before, like a salary cap, all the teams on the same budget, would that be a big game changer?
It would be a big game changer, I reckon. And I think you shouldn't be able to have more than 2 riders over a certain amount of money. And, each team should try and get, you've got 2 marquee riders, and there's minimum salary, and then you have a salary cap, and then it brings the teams in. I think, instead of seeing Jumbo 1, 2, 3 in the Vuelta, is that good for the sport?
Yeah, I would say no. I mean,
I don't think so.
I don't think it's good for the sport. Speaking of Jumbo, obviously, gosh, they gave us a little bit of frustration / entertainment at the end of the season with this whole are we merging, are we not merging business, losing sponsors. Now, they've come out now and said that they're looking at changing their team name to Yellow Bee, the letter B, Yellow Bee. And they're doing this because with changing sponsors, they want people to be able to identify to a team rather than to a brand name. Yes or no?
Yellow Bee sounds absolutely ridiculous. Just reminds me of a guy I trained with who put on too much weight, and then he had a yellow jersey, and he actually called himself the Bumblebee because he looks so too big. I'm not going to name you, mate. But,
well, I think that might be part of it because they're called the Killer Bees because of their kit. That's a bit of a nickname, isn't it?
Oh, I get that. And yes, you want to brand your team. You want to be called. I mean the New York, the Yankees, right?
Yeah.
So I
or
get
the Dodgers,
idea. Yeah, the Dodgers, or the Yankees, or the Kings, or New York Giants, or whatever. But I understand that.
But maybe Yellow Bee.
Yellow Bees. No, maybe not.
Isn't hitting the mark there?
No, not for me. Not for me.
It's when you're looking at the teams and the budgets and the continuity, you're kind of on the flip side. So your team, I said it at the top of the show, ARA, Pro Racing Sunshine Coast.
No, ARA Skip-Capital.
See, there you go, Skip-Capital.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, you've got the Atlassian fellas on board for that. Now, if we were looking at that team and you took away that naming sponsor and you called yourself the Sunny Coast Bros.
Sunny Boys. Isn't
Sunny
that an
Boys.
ice cream?
Well, it is, but there's also the ladies. So how do we...
Sunny Girls?
The Sunny Boys and the Sunny Girls?
The Wave Riders.
The Wave Riders. I don't mind that.
Yeah.
But then surely ARA and Skip-Capital wouldn't be too pumped about that.
No, they pay for the right to be naming sponsors.
And how important is that to them?
It's huge because then they own the piece of the team, the sport. They're being the number one team in Australia. if that's the case, you know.
And they get their name by the commentators saying their brands over and over again.
Over and over again. So, you know, be calling, you know, the yellow bees up the front again, you know. So, you know,
it's such a bad name, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. It is. It's a shocking name. So, but yeah, I understand that. That's you know, sponsors. Without them, we don't have, you know, we don't have a sport. So, but yeah, I think the UCI can do it way better than they're doing it now. They're still living in the 80s. Oh. The UCI just totally living in the 80s. There's no parity. I think they are doing some good stuff with women's cycling now compared to where it was. But as far as moving the sport forward, they're still stuck. They're in reverse in moving it forward. Well, they really don't do anything to move the sport forward.
No.
You know, sock height and levers. Come on.
Like, that's what they're focusing on.
That's what they're focusing on.
And you have to think, coming out of Saudi Arabia, there may be some concerns around their support of women's cycling as well. Well, that would be a question mark.
100%. You just hit the nail on the head. They only just let females drive in Saudi Arabia just recently. Yep. Isn't that nice of them?
Yeah, hey? how nice. Terribly kind of them.
How terribly kind of them.
Another domestic duty for us.
Anyway, there goes all the Saudi money.
I know.
Podcast is going to be massive.
Oopsie doozy. Now, turning the focus a bit to your team, Hank, because I want to dive into this a bit. We've been talking about what a mess the UCI is, but thankfully a lot of the races are owned independently and there's a lot of history there. We've got some really great races in Australia as well. The Tour of Tassie, I know, is one that you have enjoyed as a DS and watching the results of that. There's also been some rumours that you guys might have a little bit of a twinkle in your eye around the World Tour. What about that?
Yeah, obviously that's the goal moving forward in any cycling team, I think. But if you do go down that road, you then compromise where are the juniors going. So, yes, it would be fantastic if someone just wrote us a nice big fat check for 20 a year, mil.
Yes.
Because that's what you need. I mean, even for a Pro Tour team, which used to be the Pro Continental, they call it Pro Tour now. That's €3 million, so that's $5 Australian
just for the registration.
Just pretty much budget, just because you have to pay a minimum, I think, of $47,000 per person, including the Swannies and mechanics. Every person has to be paid that minimum wage, and that's how it should be. So if you do go down the World Tour route, then that suffers with the juniors coming out into, you know, under 23, male and female. So right now, that's what our whole process is about mentoring, you know, the juniors. We do have juniors on the team. We have 5 or 6, 3 or 4 ladies and young men. But yeah, we've got like 27 riders. So, you know, under 23 ladies, under 23 men, and junior men and junior ladies. So for us, that's the important thing of having that step. You can't just go from club racing, national championships into the World Tour. There's got to be that other stepping stone. That's where Bridge Lane is, and Cage Park Up, and Blackshaw Racing, and ARA Skip-Capital all come in, because without those teams, you know, we just don't, you know, there's no pathway, and you pretty much got to get on a plane and go to Europe and start entering in Kermesse races. Which a lot of Australians have done in history. So, but you know, we get bigger every year. So, and we do more races every year, and that's kind of what we do
on the roll. Merksy,
Hank, do you guys get rewarded like for developing talent? You know, like footy teams do. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, they're bringing in a fee if you do come in out of a development squad into a World Tour team. They are bringing that in. I don't know where we're sitting with that. That it has been mentioned. It is going ahead. it's a small $5,000 fee, I think, something like that.
Oz Cycling from UCI?
From the team.
Oh, from the team.
From the team.
That's cool.
So, I mean, if you're putting 3 or 4 riders up a year, then it's good. But, I mean, still pittance really doesn't even cover the cost of their group set, just about. But but it's something. But I don't quote me on that figure. But, yeah, I know that there will be some kind of compensation for that team. And I know that works in soccer really well. Teams actually survive on it, but they bring a young person up and then put them into a bigger team, and they get a fee.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up soccer. I know that in soccer and in AFL, the players, when they have children, and when they're about 6 or 7, I believe, they get talent scouted. If they appear to have any of the skills, they then kind of get put on a pre-sign list at that club. So the club is trying really hard to hold on to the next generation. Do you think there's any eye in that in cycling? Like if you see the youngster come through from a former pro, would you look more closely at them and be more interested than just your average club rider?
Yeah, you would. I mean, you would, but that's a difficult one. I mean, obviously
we don't have a lot yet, do we?
No, we don't. I mean, if you look at Taylor Finney, his mum was Connie Carpenter and Davis Finney, so you kind of always knew he was going to be a monster, and end up being world champion time trial. So I mean, yeah, but it's a difficult one, and I think we even looked at Max Gould this year, who's Gouldies, who I race with, and Matt Wilson and Baden and Brad McGee and Ben Kirsten, we all raced with him, and I think his young bloke is racing, has got something to do with us next year. So
cool.
That'll be interesting to see. But yeah, very very cool that they can. That idea is great, but I don't think there's enough. We're
not evolved enough yet, perhaps.
No, we don't. Our participation isn't huge, I think, in cycling in Australia. It's not massive.
If Erska Zigart and her boyfriend, what's his name? If they
Podgy.
Pogacar, if they have a kid.
Oh, my Lord.
We did, Joel and I had a bit of fun with this many episodes ago, actually, like the super babies, like who would you marry up to get the best genetic offspring. We had some between Van Vleuten and Van der Poel. We thought there could be some pretty impressive genetics there. Although maybe climbers to make a super climber.
Yes,
that could be a way to do it.
This is how old I am. I actually was in the team with Matthew's dad, Ardrey.
Oh, were you?
Yes, we roomed together.
Oh, there you go.
This is how old it's feeling. Like my favourite rider ever. He's like. I roomed with his dad, so it's one of those watershed moments.
I kind of watched. I shared T-Mobile with Eric Zabel, and in fact, I got one of his 6-day track bikes when I was on the team, and then when his boy came to the Tour Down Under, I felt quite old in that moment. I've got to say,
it does make you feel old.
It does make you
moving
feel
on.
Old. Look, I've gotten a little bit Christmassy, so. I've got you a little gift. It's a pair of socks, Hank.
Oh, lovely.
And they have Christmas lights on them, and it says, "Let's get lit."
Okay.
So there you go. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. That's what the boys said the other day when I went out riding with them.
Just got to make sure they're the correct height.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they can't be too high. The UCI will be measuring. Merksy, I've got a pair for you. They're gingerbread, and it says "Bite Me."
Oh.
So they're yours. And Joel, we haven't forgotten you. You have some beer glasses that have been turned into a reindeer.
Oh.
So there you go.
Lovely. Thank you, Kate.
Hank, thank you so much for joining us to talk about some of the bigger issues that have been on this week, episode 74 of The Wheelhouse. Like, share, follow, subscribe, and all that jazz. Merry Christmas.